Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Fallen London. Today we're going to be having a look at August's exceptional story, Inheritance. But as always, before we start, I'm going to encourage you to become an exceptional friend. Play these for yourself. There are spoilers ahead. Not only do you get access to these wonderful stories, you get double the candles, more cards in the deck, and more outfits and various other things. Without further ado, let's jump in here. An appeal for assistance. You step inside a quiet pub. Whatever your reason for seeking solitude, you are thwarted by a young man who slams into the bar and thrusts a handful of coins at the landlady before you can pay for your drink. "Allow me," he pants. His smart clothes are in disarray and his face is flushed. "Please," he says, "I need help." "Well, let's accept the drink. You might as well hear him out." "I know your time is valuable," says the young man, beckoning you to a quiet booth. "I'm afraid I've made myself quite familiar with your activities. I'm not a spy or anything, just a bookkeeper. But I'm worried about my..." He blushes. "Actually, we're not exactly... I mean, it's complicated." He gulps his drink. "She's an archivist, or at least that's her job. But she's more than that. She's clever, no, wise. While everyone else is fretting about trifles, she thinks about things that really matter." He sighs. "I love her, and she's in trouble." Okay. The ardent bookkeeper believes that his beloved, the Sage Archivist, is in trouble. He seeks your assistance. So, what does the Sage Archivist actually archive? Perhaps her work puts her in danger. "She works at a university," says the ardent bookkeeper. "Benthic College, archiving First City artifacts. Cuneiform tablets. She's brilliant, but she's no snob. Interested in everything. She says her work has taught her that all perspectives are valuable." He smiles. "She isn't perfect. Sometimes she'll be so consumed with work that she forgets to eat, and she's frightfully disorganized for an archivist. It's as if part of her mind's lost in the First City. We made a good team. I made her mushroom sandwiches and reminded her to pay rent, and she..." He sighs. "She made me happy." Okay, well, what manner of trouble is she in? You should ascertain this before deciding whether to help. "I don't know," says the ardent bookkeeper, running a hand through his hair. "That's why I need your help. She and I were speaking of marriage, even children, and suddenly..." He throws up his hands. "She ended it. Politely. Which made it worse. I know her. There's something she wasn't telling me. About her work, perhaps? They do all sorts of strange things at the university." He frowns. "I know it sounds like I just can't accept her decision, but if she really didn't want to be with me, I'd be devastated. But only at first, because all I really want is for her to be alright. The Neath would be an even darker place without her." Whose books does the ardent bookkeeper keep? Should not discount any lead. "I doubt it's relevant," says the ardent bookkeeper, lowering his voice. "But I work for someone at the bazaar. Our operation handles vegetable imports from the surface. My tasks don't require much intelligence," he says with a shrug. "Just reliability and trustworthiness." He considers this last word. I'm not supposed to talk about my work. Nothing I've said is a secret, really. It's just..." He swallows. Please don't mention it to anyone else. I can't lose this job." Can he not help her himself? "I'm out of my depth," says the ardent bookkeeper. "Since I don't know what the threat is, I need someone who can handle anything. I scoured London, but of the people I found, you were the only one who didn't seem to present an even bigger danger." He fiddles with his tankard. "If you won't help, I'll have to do it myself. All I've ever done is bookkeeping. I've never even been in a fight. I probably made some dreadful mistake and lose my job. Or worse. But I can't just do nothing. So we have decided you are ready to tell the ardent bookkeeper whether you'll help him. Will you help? Says the ardent bookkeeper. I will understand if not. This is an imposition, and I can't pay you much. I'll have to do it myself if you decline, but I suppose that is scarcely your problem. If you tell the ardent bookkeeper you won't help him, he'll take on the task himself. You can still conduct your own investigation. No, we shall help this poor fellow. Oh, thank you, says the ardent bookkeeper, sagging with relief. You're the best person for this job, I'm sure of it. He lowers his voice. I think her work is the source of it. See what you can uncover at Benthic, then meet me back here. I'm afraid I can't give you my office address. My employer wouldn't like it. He shrugs on his coat. I must be leaving. We'll speak again soon and, well, thank you. He shoulders his way through the pub door and is gone. You are alone at the table, the ardent bookkeeper having left you with the task of investigating whatever threatens his beloved, the Sage Archivist. We shall leave. There is no longer anyone to buy you drinks. To fully understand what is afoot, it would be worth investigating both the Sage Archivist and the ardent bookkeeper. Begin your investigation at either on the trail of the Sage Archivist or on the trail of the ardent bookkeeper, anywhere in London. Who shall we look into first? Let's look into the bookkeeper, the man who hired us for this job. The ardent bookkeeper works for an operation that handles vegetable imports. He was wary of discussing his employer, but revealed that the business is located near the bazaar. Regardless of whether his work has any connection to the threat faced by the Sage Archivist, it may still be worth investigating. Perhaps the young man has something to hide. So we can either travel to the bazaar side streets, you know the way, or you could stow away on a delivery to the side streets if you don't know the route, but luckily for me I do know the route to the bazaar side streets, so we shall just walk there like a normal citizen. The spires of the bazaar loom over the side streets, a warren of exclusive businesses crammed into a tiny premises. You follow directions to the administrative district, in which harried clerks handle Neath-wide businesses from cramped offices. The ardent bookkeeper exits a door beneath a sign for vegetable imports and vanishes into the crowd. The vegetable import operation occupies a tiny office in the administrative district of the bazaar side streets. Its cohort of clerks is preoccupied with a barge of cabbages blocking the Cumaean Canal, and pay you no mind. Perhaps they believe you to be a courier. The ardent bookkeeper's name glints at you from a brass plaque on one of the desks. Oh, I could search his desk if I have to do these first. Wonderful. Let's listen to the clerks. What does their work entail? Distributing vegetables throughout the Neath before they rot must be meticulously choreographed. The clerks speak with reverence about work which must once have been quotidian. Plant, flesh, swollen with sunlight and rainwater, is now sacred. It contains another world, frozen in cellulose. In one corner, the clerks discuss the impact the canal's blockage will have on their employer. It is Mr. Apples, the master of the bazaar, who deals in things that grow. The creature will need to visit one of its warehouses in Wolfstack Docks to inspect the goods when they finally arrive. If you wish to meet with Mr. Apples, you now have a location. I have spent enough time with the masters recently, I'd rather pass. Let's eavesdrop on a conversation about the ardent bookkeeper. Apparently, the cabbage debacle was a result of his oversight. The ardent bookkeeper has been distracted lately. Until a few weeks ago, he never made a single mistake. Something must have changed. He's bright, muses one, but afraid of thinking for himself. It's as if he believes that if he just works hard and doesn't draw attention to himself, misfortune will pass him by. I don't think he comes from much, replies another. I think he's always been afraid of going back there. He was different a while ago, interjects a third. Met someone, I think. Seemed a little more sure of himself. For a while. Okay, that backs up his story of meeting the sage. Let's search his desk. What will his effects reveal about him? You rifle through potato shipping manifests, cabbage quality evaluations, and ledgers of parsnip transactions, and find nothing revelatory until you push aside a book on radish tax regulations. A missive falls out. The ink is sticky. It smells fecund, like overripe fruit. Written in a spidery hand and dated a year ago, the letter is from the ardent bookkeeper's employer. It instructs him to meet with an archivist at Benthic College and get the measure of her. This young woman's turnip accounts, the letter claims, are not in order. This must have been how the young couple met. Whether he thought the detail important or not, the ardent bookkeeper neglected to mention it. Can I help you? Inquires a clerk in a manner that suggests she means to do nothing of the sort. Well, let's return to London. We may have outstayed our welcome. You board the crowded carriage alongside exhausted side street workers who live far from their place of employment. By the time it departs, the carriage is so full of passengers that you can no longer see out of the window. The journey back to London is disorienting, and you emerge, blinking, in Vale Garden. Let's have a look into the Sage Archivist. You have offered to help the ardent bookkeeper uncover the threat to his beloved, the Sage Archivist. She works at Benthic College, archiving First City cuneiform tablets. The ardent bookkeeper thinks this may be the source of the danger. To follow this lead, you must make your way to the university. Well, luckily, I also have a path to the university. But if you did not, you could follow some academics. Two gowned youths just walked past, flexing their ostentatious vocabularies. Clearly, first years. Yeah, the rest of them are too busy having parties. We learned about that in the last exceptional story. At the university, you follow cryptic signs to a stone staircase leading to the basement. You grip the mouldering banister as you descend, inhaling air that is both cold and delicately fungal. The cuneiform archive is a vaulted cellar lined with wooden drawers, some several feet wide, others no bigger than a matchbox. In one corner, a young woman sits behind a desk. The Sage Archivist is wearing a rumpled shirt, suspenders and dusty trousers. Through thick glasses, she stares intently at a cuneiform tablet. Let's speak with the Sage Archivist. Perhaps she has a moment. Time has eroded the cuneiform tablet, but the intricate marks pressed into the surface thousands of years ago are still just visible. The Sage Archivist transcribes them into a book using iridescent purple ink. She jumps when she realizes she is not alone, almost upending the jar. Hello, yes, I'm here. Who are you? Am I late for something? She scrambles through the papers on her desk for a pocket watch. Ah, I see, I'm about 3 hours late for lunch. Well, I suppose another few minutes won't matter. Can I help you find something? The Sage Archivist screws the lid onto her jar of iridescent ink to avoid a mishap. She is a stark contrast between the archive's neatly labelled drawers and the chaos on her desk. "I have a system," she says, as your eyes drift across it. Although she is clearly busy, and you do not have an appointment, she is in no hurry for you to leave. So we have two options here. We can admit that you are here on the ardent bookkeeper's behalf. You wish to tell the truth. Or we can tell her we have an interest in First City studies. I mean, I do have an interest in First City studies, but I am of the opinion that the truth is usually the best way to go, so we're just going to say it. The Sage Archivist's expression turns sorrowful as you recount your meeting with the ardent bookkeeper. "I'd hoped I'd begun to fade into the past for him," she says. "It's not that I don't..." She stops herself. "It's just best if we go our separate ways. Please reassure him I am in no danger." She smiles stoically. "Unless you consider overwork a danger, I'm afraid I am prone to it. As for you," she says, brightening, "you've come all this way for nothing. Won't you have some tea before you go?" "Sure." The Sage Archivist balances her teacup on a tiny, unoccupied space at the corner of her desk. She glances fondly about the archive, as if surrounded by old friends. Let's ask what she was writing when we arrived. And was that violent ink she was using? "I was translating a tablet," the Sage Archivist explains. "Few can still read this variety of cuneiform because it requires understanding what has happened in the First City at the time. For example, the configuration of these marks here represent power dynamics. See? Really, translation is impossible. I'm just doing what I can to communicate its meaning." She polishes her glasses. "And you're right, the ink is violent, lingers in the mind and reveals connections one might otherwise miss. Reading it isn't comfortable because it makes one acutely aware of the similarities between the First City's plight and our own." Okay, well, can I inquire about her work? What does she archive exactly? "I translate and archive every cuneiform tablet the university acquires," says the Sage Archivist. "Most are unearthed in archaeological digs around the cavern. It's surprising how many remain, considering that 4 cities have descended upon them. I don't believe in such things, but their survival feels almost miraculous." She runs a finger over the tablet before her. "These little slabs are almost all that connect us to the world before the Masters," she says. "They're our inheritance. We have a responsibility to those who came before to ensure their wisdom isn't lost." Okay, let's look around the archive. We might learn something. "I've argued for a better room," says the Sage Archivist, wrinkling her nose at the lingering smell of damp. "But the university believes that since these cuneiform tablets were found under the city, another few decades in a cellar won't hurt them." She crosses her legs and a blob of what looks like clotted cream slides from her boot onto the floor. She catches you looking. "Ah yes," she says quietly. Don't mention it to the professors, but I've been conducting some unofficial experiments in a lacquer laboratory. I have reason to believe it could have some archival application." We know that lacquer is not a good thing to be messing with. Okay, let's ask if there is anything troubling her. You wouldn't have to tell the ardent bookkeeper what she says. The Sage Archivist sighs. "I told you I'm in no trouble of anything anyone can fix." He looks around the archive. "The people who wrote these tablets are gone. Even if the First City had never fallen or been crushed by the Second, it would still have come to an end. As will London, as will I. And I am troubled by that, because in spite of everything, I enjoy my life. I believe I am doing valuable work that almost no one is qualified to do, and I worry about what will happen when I am no longer here to continue it." What a bizarre thing to worry about in a city where you are basically immortal. Okay, well, let's end the conversation for now. "Alright," says the Sage Archivist. "I still have tea to drink, so do come back if there's anything else you'd like to talk about." Ooh, we can visit the lacquer laboratory. The Sage Archivist runs unofficial experiments there. The air near the lacquer laboratory is thick with ammonia, and your eyes water as you open the door. You brush away your tears to find yourself in a cavernous room filled with vats of creamy liquid. The lacquer steep professor dreamily greets you as you arrive, though her mind appears to be elsewhere. The Sage Archivist believes lacquer could have some archival application and has been conducting experiments to discover them. Her bench is identifiable by a cuneiform tablet propped up beside a tangle of tubes. Nearby, a flask of lacquer rests on top of a book. At the other end of the room, the lacquer steep professor glides between the milky vats and what looks like a stone sarcophagus. Let's speak with the lacquer steep professor. What does she do here? The lacquer steep professor places a pale hand on your arm as you approach. "Ah," she says, "you are real. The lacquer is filled with memories, you see. After a long day amid the fumes, the laboratory fills with people I have never met." She casts a fond eye about the room. "But few of them are really here." She leads you to a vat of milky liquid. "Cover your nose," she says, pulling her scarf across her own face. "This lacquer fell 2 Christmases ago and melted soon after, but the memories are still just as strong. Every year, it has been becoming more potent. I'm trying to understand why." Interesting. Let's peer inside the sarcophagus. What or whom does it contain? Lying within the sarcophagus is what looks like a human-shaped bar of well-used soap. It reeks of ammonia, and when you lean in, you are a young woman again, leaving your studies to drink cider in the dappled shade of the library garden. Florence places the bottle in the grass and brushes your hair away from your face. "A gnomon," says the lacquer steep professor, pulling you gently away from the fumes. "Made from lacquer and my own blood. I've used some advanced techniques to keep it intact longer than most, but it will soon melt. I must say, I don't enjoy its disintegration. It's like watching myself die." Let's examine the Sage Archivist's research. She found a way to use lacquer to store information. You move the flask of lacquer and rifle through the book. The Sage Archivist has logged the results of her experiments in black ink, with conclusions written in violet. She makes frequent reference to a source that could refer to a cuneiform tablet, but 2 pages are stuck together. Carefully, you pry them apart. According to the Archivist's research, there could be a way to predict where lacquer will emerge, not just at Christmas, but at other times too. Such a project would be complex, require great leaps of intuition, and, she suggests, first-hand experience in all lacquer floods that have occurred in the Neath. We can spill lacquer on the Sage Archivist's bench. She will likely wish to clean it up. You sidle over to the Sage Archivist's equipment, uncork the flask, and tip it over. White lacquer oozes over the bench, releasing a cloud of ammonia that whirls you up through the cavern and out into the desert night. You record the positions of the stars by pushing a stylus into a slab of soft clay. They are as they should be, but there is a cloud of light behind them, as if you stagger away from the bench. The milky pool is slowly expanding towards the cuneiform tablet. The Sage Archivist will want to protect it. The spilled lacquer oozes across the Sage Archivist's bench and onto the floor. At the other end of the room, the lacquer-steeped professor glides between the milky vats and the sarcophagus. Let's leave the lacquer laboratory for now. The lacquer-steeped professor gives you a distracted wave as you return to the cuneiform archive. Do I need to tell her that I've spilled something? As you return to the archive, the Sage Archivist is rifling through her drawers in search of something or other. She waves as you arrive, narrowly avoiding her teacup. There may have been a spillage in the lacquer laboratory. There is a rare cuneiform tablet nearby, which she will want to protect. So that's where you were, says the Sage Archivist. You should be careful around lacquer, it can be extremely dangerous. Thank you for being honest about the spillage. I'm going to clean it before anyone is harmed. She gulps the last of her tea. Please don't break anything in here while I'm gone. She hurries away to the lacquer laboratory, leaving you alone in the archive. Let's explore the archive. Although the Sage Archivist claims she is in no danger, the ardent bookkeeper believes otherwise. If she is under threat, there may be something in the archive that proves it. You cast an eye about the room. The walls are lined with neatly labelled drawers, and the desk is piled high with papers. Tucked beneath the papers is a battered book. Well, let's open the drawers. What is archived within them? Each drawer contains a cuneiform tablet wrapped in canvas and accompanied by a violent transliteration. With great effort, you work open the largest drawer, which contains a vast slab of ancient clay. According to the piece of violent flecked parchment that flutters to the floor, it records pre-Lapsarian First City grain harvests and a map of silos across the city. One conceals a secret tunnel. You stare at the violent symbols. There is something familiar about their orientation. Landmarks rise from the dark soup of your memory. Rooftops, hobbles, gargoyles, London. In your mind's eye, you lay the symbols over a map of the city. You will remember the location. You gained a trace of the first city. Let's look through the Sage Archivist's papers. With whom does she correspond? Amid the university missives is a handwritten letter dated a month ago. The ink is still wet, sticky to touch. It rubs off onto your fingers and smells like overripe fruit. Only a little of the script remains unsmeared. May have concealed it from your employers at Benthic, but I know where you went when you disappeared from London as a child. I know you visit still. You and I are not so different. We both wish to preserve things. You knowledge, and I life. But you are denying both to the people of the Neath. Take me below the city, and you will be more than compensated. Going to assume that's going to be Mr. Apples? Let's read the book. It could be illuminating. The book contains a child's drawings of temples, of cuneiform, and of a smiling woman with smudgy heart penciled over her chest. Beside the drawing, the child has written something. Last night I had the dreams again, but this time they didn't stop when I woke up. The ceiling came down, so I ran to hide in the temple. I stayed there for hours, and the ground shook as rocks crashed down around me. I thought they'd seal me in, but then she came to find me, told me it was just a dream. You've all had them, she said. You'll get better at telling what's real. Then she kissed me, and we made roasted mushrooms. Let's stop searching. You have found leads for the ardent bookkeeper or yourself. You should stop meddling before the Sage Archivist returns. You strike a nonchalant pose just in time for the Sage Archivist's return. She slumps down in her chair and rubs her temples. That's rather enough lacquer for one day, she says. I'm going to make another pot of tea. Okay, well I think we're done here, so let's leave the university. You have spent enough time here. As you leave the university gates, a carriage clatters to a halt in front of you. From the murmured conversations drifting through the open window, you gather it's full of students returning their accommodation in Valegarden. And you have been mistaken for one of them. You emerge from the carriage some time later, thoroughly edified. And before we continue with this story, I think this is a perfect place for me to end the first episode of Inheritance. I'm going to thank you all very much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Let me know what you think. Your comments are greatly appreciated. I also forgot to mention that I have a coffee page at the start of this episode, so if you want to support me even more than just commenting, sharing, liking, all that sort of stuff, that is a good way of doing it. But either way, thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.